Lately, I've been seeing a lot of videos on YouTube by fundamentalists who are arguing about the Trinity and the nature of the Trinity. Now, this is an obvious sign of Laodicea. People are taking something that is eternal and way above human comprehension and trying to explain it. In Isaiah 55, verse 8, it says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." In Isaiah 57:15 it says, "For thus saith the high and lofty one that inhabiteth eternity, whose name is holy. I dwell in the high and holy place." Now, God is above eternity. God is not underneath the dictates of time, which is considered to be the fourth dimension. God is above that. God does not see time as linear. He sees it as a whole, and he inhabits eternity. So I can't explain some spiritual things, but I can explain why we cannot understand some spiritual things. And if you'll bear with me, you'll see what I'm talking about. The godly old preacher Hanley Milby, I heard him say this in a sermon about wolves, and I just want you to listen to this quote real quick.
And God began to give me things, and the heathen writers, I couldn't find anything in the religious writings at all about wolves as concerning God's people. And so I began to read what I could find, and the heathen writers would hand me little jewels that God wanted me to have and to let other people hear. And it's been a blessing to me.
Well, I got one of those jewels from the heathens when I was a little kid watching old atheist Carl Sagan explain dimensions on that show Cosmos from back in the day. So I want you to take a look at this real quick.
Let's imagine that we are perfectly flat. I mean absolutely flat. And that we live, appropriately enough, in a flatland. A land designed and named by Edwin Abbott, a Shakespearean scholar who lived in Victorian England. Everybody in flatland is, of course, exceptionally flat. We have squares, circles, triangles, and we all scurry about, and we can go into our houses and do our flat business. Now, we have width and length, but no height at all. Now, these little cutouts have some little height, but let's ignore that. Let's imagine that these are absolutely flat. That being the case, we know, us flatlanders, about left-right, and we know about forward-back, but we have never heard of up-down. Let us imagine that into flatland, hovering above it, comes a strange three-dimensional creature which, oddly enough, looks like an apple. And the three-dimensional creature sees an attractive, congenial-looking square, watches it enter its house, and decides in a gesture of interdimensional amity to say hello. "Hello," says the three-dimensional creature. "How are you? I am a visitor from the third dimension." Well, the poor square looks around his closed house, sees no one there, and what's more, has witnessed a greeting coming from his insides, a voice from within. He surely is getting a little worried about his sanity. The three-dimensional creature is unhappy about being considered a psychological aberration, and so he descends to actually enter flatland. Now, a three-dimensional creature exists in flatland only partially. Only a plane, a cross-section through him can be seen. So when the three-dimensional creature first reaches flatland, it's only the points of contact which can be seen, and as the apple were to descend through, slither by flatland, we would progressively see higher and higher slices. So the square, as time goes on, sees a set of objects mysteriously appear from nowhere and inside a closed room and change their shape dramatically. His only conclusion could be that he's gone bonkers. Well, the apple might be a little annoyed at this conclusion, and so, not such a friendly gesture from dimension to dimension, makes a contact with the square from below and sends our flat creature fluttering and spinning above flatland. At first, the square has no idea what's happening. He's terribly confused. This is utterly outside his experience. But after a while, he comes to realize that he is seeing inside closed rooms in flatland. He is looking inside his fellow flat creatures. He is seeing flatland from a perspective no one has ever seen it before to his knowledge. Getting into another dimension provides as an incidental benefit a kind of X-ray vision. Now our flat creature slowly descends to the surface, and his friends rush up to see him. From their point of view, he has mysteriously appeared from nowhere. He hasn't walked from somewhere else. He's come from some other place. They say, for heaven's sake, what's happened to you? And the poor square has to say, well, I was in some other mystic dimension called up. And they will pat him on his side and comfort him, or else they'll ask, well, show us, where is that third dimension? Point to it. And the poor square will be unable to comply.
Well, if you think about that two-dimensional guy that got picked up and shown the third dimension, consider 2 Corinthians 12. Paul says that I knew a man in Christ above 14 years ago, whether in the body I cannot tell, or whether out of the body I cannot tell, God knoweth. Such an one caught up to the third heaven, how that he was caught up into paradise and heard unspeakable words which is not lawful for a man to utter. So basically God picked up a three-dimensional being and took him into a multi-dimensional heaven. The same thing happened to John. If you look in Revelation, it says that come up hither, and he went up there and he saw the revelation, and he wasn't able to fully describe the things that he saw. That's why there's a lot of symbolic representations in Revelation. Now, a lot of the brethren are getting off on this modalism thing because it's convenient. Modalism says there's one God and there's three aspects to a single God. Just like we are a spirit, soul, and body, but we're one person. Now that's a good illustration to use like on a Jehovah's Witness to explain that there are such things as trinities, like us, for example. We're a spirit, we're a soul, we're a body, but we're one person. The sun up in the sky, it's got rays that you can see, it's got heat rays you can feel, and it's got radiation that you can't see or you can't feel. So, you can say, well, the sun's a trinity. However, if you push that example too far, you get off into modalism. God is in three persons, and you can't understand that. I heard a quote one time that said, a man that understands the Trinity will lose his mind, but a man that denies the Trinity will lose his soul. And there's a lot of brethren going around, and they're attracted to the convenience of modalism because it makes a Trinity appear logical to a three-dimensional being. However, you're dealing with a multi-dimensional God that sits above time, that sits above any dimensional aspects, and you're trying to describe him. Two-dimensional guy, that he saw the apple. Well, he couldn't even see all of the apple. He saw the parts that were in contact with the second plane. And, we're trying to describe a Trinity. We're trying to describe God in three-dimensional terms, and it ain't going to work. And just because it's illogical to a human mind does not make it not so. So yeah, there's seemingly a contradiction. You've got God in three persons, yet it's not three gods. You've got three in one. You say that doesn't make any sense. Well, it's not supposed to. My thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. So that's, I can't explain the Trinity, but I can explain why you cannot grasp the Trinity. And like I say, that doesn't mean it's not so.